getting into my own sort of personal taste or personal skills as a designer, I am very drawn to the honest expression of real materials. That is to say, masonry has its own system for how it likes to work. Masonry is most satisfactory when the walls are thick and the openings are arched and the ceilings are vaulted. Likewise, wood has its own material expression. That wood has a grain and it comes in straight pieces. So, wooden structures tend to be orthogonal geometries, trusses joined with mortise and tenon joints. So wood has this kind of rectilinear expression, and then likewise metalwork. If you think, for instance, of the chandeliers where you see metalwork in Orthodox churches, metal is expensive and it's very strong, so you don't use it in so much quantity. Metalwork can be really delicate and lacy, and that shows off the special qualities of metal. So we see that each material has its own sort of natural expression of how to design with it. And I find medieval buildings to be most satisfying architecturally, in large part because medieval buildings tend to use materials in their natural and rational way. That if you think of a typical medieval basilica, for instance, that the walls are thick and arched, and then the roof has timber trusses, and then we see very delicate sort of curvilinear wrought iron work in the gates and in the light fixtures and so forth. And then if they're going to do something really precious, like a carved sculpture, they'll use a fine stone like alabaster or marble for that. If they want to do something colorful, they'll use colored glass for stained glass or mosaics. And I find that purity of material expression really satisfying. I would contrast that, for instance, with later church architecture, whether you're looking at Renaissance or in America, like 19th century church architecture, where everything is kind of covered over with plaster, or there's a lot of trompe l'oeil, where things that aren't marble are painted to look like marble. There may be kind of unnatural uses of material, where like curvilinear window tracery is made out of wood instead of out of stone. And so in later church architecture, we see what you might call artifice or illusion. And although there can be great elegance and great craftsmanly skill in that kind of architecture, to me, I don't find very much interest in it. I like to figure out how to create beauty through the natural qualities of materials. I also have a great attraction to the expression of natural textures in how materials are finished. I like what you might call organic expression in medieval structures, that the stones are not cut too flat, the plaster is not applied perfectly smooth, the wooden surfaces are hand hewn or hand plane, and you can see slight undulation in them. I think it's very satisfying when you can see the touch of the human hand on the surface of materials, that you can run your hand across a wall and feel the undulation of the plaster and feel the movement of the plasterer's trowel, or you can run your hand across a piece of furniture and feel the undulation of the plane from the carpenter, or you can look at a painted surface and see the brush strokes of the painter. In old buildings that were handmade, these are the kinds of things that make a building seem physically lovable. I often look at old buildings and I think, sometimes the really, really well designed, really elegant buildings, the ones that look, really professional in a sense. I may admire those buildings on an intellectual level, as an architect in particular, understanding all the rules of classical design. I might be intellectually really impressed by some fine classical building that it it has perfect proportions. It follows every rule perfectly. It's built out of really fine materials that are crafted, to absolute perfection. And but in the end, that building may leave me feeling a bit cold. And in contrast, sometimes I visit a little chapel in a remote village where it was kind of built by amateurs with, and they used poor material. It's just, rough field stone and lumpy plaster, and, the timber trusses, maybe, gnarly pieces of wood with knot holes in them. And, but sometimes a building like that is much more special. You can fall in love with the very substance of the building. You can get a sense of the love of all of the people who went to the effort to build it. Speaking in Orthodox terms, we might say that you can love the elegant building with a love like agape, but you can love the handmade organic building with a love like eros. That the very physical substance of the building is attractive in a emotionally overwhelming way. And that's a quality of architecture that's almost non-existent with contemporary construction. Usually the only place you can find buildings that have that kind of organic craft expression is in what you might call alternative or hippie architecture, architecture built out of straw bales or cob, where people kind of deliberately turn their back on the modern construction industry and try to build something very primitive by hand with amateur labor, specifically in order to achieve that kind of organic beauty. And it's wonderful that sometimes people have the time to be able to build things like that, but it's not really a solution to build at a scale like that. And so, because I'm designing churches that have to be built at a large scale by an actual construction company, I'm always trying to find ways of achieving some of that organic expression in the context of modern construction. So often it's as simple as just telling the craftsman not to do it too well. For instance, I build a lot of masonry structures, and I build them out of concrete block, which is a very affordable modern system of building a masonry wall, and the concrete block gets covered over with stucco or plaster. Wise instructed, the stucco crews will try to make the surfaces perfectly flat and the corners perfectly square, because that's the aesthetic that's generally expected of craftsmen on construction sites nowadays. But I tell the plasterers or the stuccoers, please make it look like an old church in Mexico. And usually these guys are Hispanic, and they come from Mexican villages, and they know exactly what I mean. And they can then really delight in doing this. They make the thickness of the plaster uneven, and they make the corners rounded, and they kind of sponge a rough texture into it. And it's no great effort for them. It's not more cost or anything, but when I tell them that I want this to look like an ancient handmade building, people can do that. They still have that ability in their hearts and in their hands to make a building feel like that. And oftentimes it's just a matter of telling them to do so. Even like when I'm doing a house and I need the woodwork painted, I take away the sprayers and the rollers from the painters, and I say, just do this with your brushes. Believe me, it won't even take you any longer. You'll see. And they brush everything, and they say, but it's not perfect. You can see the brush strokes, and I say that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it looks in an old building, because I don't want it to look perfect. I want it to look like somebody made this. I want to see the motion of your hand, and it makes an amazing difference. All of a sudden, people whose work normally kind of looks cold and plasticky, actually looks like real craftsmanship. And when they've done it, they see it, and they feel delighted in it, and they say, I'm never going back. I'm always going to do it like this.
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind come ask if you'd last till the end. Traded money and lands, family dreams and plans, for a desert exile and a life of trial.